What's up, movie maniacs? I am Ricky Grimes. Welcome back to another edition of Three Corners of Horror, brought to you by Horror Fiend TV, right here on YouTube. Make sure you smash that like button, hit subscribe, share this video with all your friends. We would greatly appreciate that. Once again, back with me, the two best. JR, what's up, son?
Not much, man. Ready to dive into another installment of a iconic found footage franchise of VHS.
Joe, what up? How you like this one, Joe?
But well, we'll find out. We'll see towards the end. I mean,
I try getting you there.
It's not the first one. It is never going to replace the first one, but we'll see where it stands up there.
But that's the cool thing about VHS. There's always something. If you don't like the whole movie, there's always that one segment that stands out. Let's see if this one has that for any of us and any of you guys. So with that being said, VHS 94 is going to be the film we're going to be discussing today. If you're not familiar with this franchise, it's almost an anthology series in a sense, where it's a group of directors and writers, producers all getting together and making one film. Each director has their own little segment within the film itself. JR, why don't you get us started? Now, every VHS film has one wraparound story that leads into the other segments within the film. Why don't you get us started on that and the first segment, which is called Storm Drain?
Now, right off the bat, we get into this whole, it looks like a task force, the contraband squad going around into this facility. You know, they find, like, obviously something happened here. We get one scene where there's a girl sitting down, her head back, her eyes missing, and she's doing like a countdown. So when the countdown is done, bam, we go into our first story, which is Storm Drain, like you said. Now, this one, for me, it started off good with this one being the first of the movies, because this is going to like urban legend, like where in this one we have a story of this thing called a rat man that's been spotted in the city, and you know, people tend to believe it lives in the sewers, like in New York. If you live in New York, the alligators that people thought lived in the sewers there. But you know, it's the name of the reporter is Holly Marciano. She's played by Anna Hopkins, who, if you're a fan of the show Expanse, like Joe is, she plays Monica Stewart in the Expanse. So it's good to see a familiar face. And well, she goes right into the sewers, and she's with her cameraman Jeff, who's played by Christian Potenza. Now, she wants this big story. She knows it's a big story, and it's being followed by, the city. So we go into the sewers. She's trying to do a recording, and she does a recording. You hear noises in the background. Being a reporter, she wants to get the scoop. Me, personally, I would have ran the hell out of there. But no, she decides, let's go into the sewers. So as she goes deeper and deeper into sewers with Jeff, they eventually find like a homeless community that's living there. Now, the first interaction, they believe every homeless person they saw is, "Are you Rat Man? Are you Rat Man? Are you Rat Man?" So eventually we get to see this thing, which we learn that there's this one gentleman who's basically like a pastor. Yeah, like a pastor who started this whole movement, and they believe this thing is called Ratma. So on that, Joe, what do you think?
All right, so because it's the two beginning things. The first one, I was already put off with the first one. The interaction with the police officers, you can tell like there was a whole lot of egos going on, and the whole thing was just a little too frenetic for me. And that actually continues to play out up until we get to the end. It would not have been my lead-in for the end, because especially with the payoff. So as far as Storm Drain, yeah, like Junior said, I mean, first of all, even if I was a reporter, I would not have gone into the Storm Drain. Yeah, I you know what? I can admit I would not want to get any of that shit on me. So that would have just stopped me from automatically going in there. And then when they ran into Bill, which was the first guy they ran into, and they asked him if he was Rat Man,
Bill.
The dude is covered in a bunch of gooey shit. I mean, and she goes, "Here's my card." I mean, I'm like, okay, wait, hold on, really? But like, it started off kind of good, like the whole urban legend thing. Junior, like, I love how you brought that up, because as far as I remember, I don't know if it was gator or crocodile, but there was one old '80s movie that had to deal with the alligators in New York growing big and eating people.
Alligator, wasn't it alligator?
I was yeah.
Alligator.
So it's a good nod to remind that, so I can see that. When you got to the pasture, then it got into this whole little like freaky thing. When you saw Ratma, the face kind of reminded me of the face in Alien Resurrection, which was a combination of the human and the xenomorph.
Mm-hmm.
Which then I was like, oh, okay, so you just copied somebody else's monster. But for me, the only cool part I liked about the segment was towards the end when she's out there discussing it. Just the way it was shot, it kind of reminded me of like They Live and V, just that cinematography because of the time that it took place. For me, Ratman was number 4 as far as the segments.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more as far as the opening wraparound. I believe it's called Holly Hell.
Yes.
And the way it was shot, a lot of that really looked like a VHS film. A lot of glitches, a clever way of hiding all the cuts, by the way, for that one. The one thing with VHS, they're all found footage films, but they each integrate the found footage element a little differently. They use different techniques. So it's not just a guy walking with a camera. The Ratman episode was the most, I would say, traditional as far as found footage is concerned. The ending, and I got this on my notes, was fucking fantastic. With Holly, that's your name. That's the actress, right?
Holly. Well, Holly's the name of the reporter.
Yeah, okay. Well, she comes out of the storm drain. She survives. They find her. She's within the newsroom doing a report. She starts mumbling "Ratma, Ratma," and then she just pukes this vile, black goo all over the guy's face, and his face completely melts off. Eyeballs popping off. That looked completely great. I'm like, I love it. Practical effects. You got my vote on that. I forgot to mention this before. This one was directed by Chloe Okuno, who is a newer filmmaker who's done mostly short films up until this point. And that's going to be the trend in this film. They use a lot of newer directors doing a lot of stuff for this film. Usually the VHS always got this tight-knit group of guys. Adam Wingard.
Adam Wingard. From the first
Ty
one.
West. That's going to show up a little later. And so they're using a lot of newer up and coming independent directors, which it's cool. I like that. So with that being said, we're gonna jump into the second segment right now. There's nothing really to discuss as far as the first wraparound story. We're gonna get into that at the very end of this episode. So right now we're gonna go into the second episode. This segment, it's called The Final Wake?
The Wake.
Did I write it wrong here?
No, it's The Wake.
So this one was my personal favorite, and if you guys know me, it's for obvious reasons. I think this one here was a little different. At first, I was a little bit hesitant of how it was shot, but it did pick up for me. So Joe, I'm gonna go to you. Talk to us about The Wake. What did you enjoy this one better than Ratman?
I did enjoy this one better than Ratman. Actually, this is my number 3. So first of all, kudos to anyone who works in a morgue, in a funeral home. I could not at all be able to no. And I have friends, if you guys are watching it, dude, don't know how you guys are doing it. But I do have 2 friends who run a funeral home. It would just freak me the hell out. So you're introduced to Haley, and then she's sitting there talking to her bosses, who basically this is her first time that she's hosting The Wake. Now, mind you, you can already tell there's a storm going on out there. So the environment is being slowly set up for you. So Haley's left alone, a bunch of weird things start to happening. She's sitting there waiting for the guests. She calls her friend to find out some information on this person. You hear that the guy who put him together had a lot of work to do. So anyway, once the lights go out, I'm just going to go ahead and mention that I would have called my boss and said, it's a wrap. Lights are out. Listen, I'm going to lock the doors. I'm out. Instead, she ended up staying, and we finally have this guy show up out of nowhere. And I didn't notice this until the second watch. The first time I watched it, the other guy just kind of sat there. But when I sat there and watched it the second time, I heard he was making an incantation.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't catch that in the first time around, and so he sits there, does this incantation, and then leaves, and then because these are segments so not to take everything away, but at that point, the guy leaves, all hell breaks loose, Junior.
For me, this was my third as well. One, I'm sorry if you're in that home and the coffin is half off the thing. Why are you standing there continually recording? I would have just, as soon as you see him, because we get to see this guy with half his face basically gone, look in one direction. What she does, she calls out his name. I mean, I'm sorry. I would have just look. You do what you got to do. I'm out. I'm just gonna lock up real quick. I would have left, but being it's a horror, she stays. And it starts coming at her. I mean, I'll be honest. I kind of laughed a little bit in this because it was
outrageous.
It was silly to a certain degree, because you have this half-faced thing coming at you, and you can't find nowhere to hide. Now, mind you, she just walked through the door that was just there before. And I mean, the whole sequence is kind of like, my God, this woman just doesn't have any common sense. I mean, she gets chased down. Eventually, we see the thing attack her. The funny scene was when she goes next to the coffin, she looks down, half his face is like, eyeballs like looking at her.
That's great, yeah.
Which is good. I mean, this is pure 90s horror, like visuals.
Yep.
And then to top it off, we finally see her leave and she just like walks out the window. I'm like, you could have just did that the whole freaking time.
Wrong.
Was in the
what
window?
I think what happened was, so when the guy made the incantation, he woke up whatever was inside him. Because if you go back and watch it again, after the tornado hits, because that's another thing. The guy walks in and tells the tornado is coming. So the tornado hits the place, windows go crashing in, camera's on. I'm not going to get up and do it, but she's walking. And then she goes like this.
She's possessed.
And keeps walking back out.
She's turned.
So whatever the guy woke up inside, the guy that was in the coffin ended up jumping in her. And basically, she's possessed and walks out. It's not that, I don't think Haley walked out. I think that whatever was in the guy that was in the coffin was now inside her.
Yeah.
She could have jumped out that window anytime, though.
But the window was there. She jumped out after the tornado hit.
Oh, no.
The windows were blown.
I would have jumped out through their window regardless of the tornado.
I guess he would. Yeah.
It's just a couple static shots with a few, roaming cameras when she picks up the camera and moves along. I really like that sense of like claustrophobia that you're just stuck. You can't really see what's going on because you're stuck to these different angles, and there's not much going on other than her and that corpse. And the corpse makeup was done really well. Definitely something out of the 80s, like 90s, I would say. And it was so silly that I liked it because of that. It didn't try to go too serious. It was going for that weird, like almost like that weird, like EC Comics creep show type vibe to it. And that's what I really dug about this episode. Which this one here was done by Simon Barrett. He's done a few films. Again, a lot of short stuff, but he worked on prior VHS films. He did The Seance, which is a feature film, but he works a lot with Adam Wingard. And actually he worked on You're Next. So he's part of that. He's part of that family. So that's pretty cool. He's probably the bigger name out of everyone that's worked on this film right now. Now, this next segment is going to be directed by Timo Tahanto. It's going to be called The Subject. This one here is probably the most unique VHS segment I think I've personally seen. This director made The Devil Take You 1 and 2, which is an Indonesian Evil Dead ripoff. Which it's I saw the first one. I didn't see the second one. It's fun. It's not Evil Dead. I'm not saying it is, but when you watch it, you'll see why I call it an Evil Dead ripoff. But he also did The Night Comes for Us, which is also a pretty good movie. This segment here now, The Subject is it's definitely more of a video game type feel to it. JR, why don't you tell us all your thoughts on this? Walk us through, because this one here started a little slow for me, but then it picks up. For me, I would say this is my personal favorite segment. We first meet the creator, James Sohandra, who's played by Buddy Ross, and he's experimenting on two subjects. To his right, you have this guy strapped on to this table. And to the left, you have a girl sitting in the back with basically her head covered up, which usually knows that's going to happen. So he goes and, he starts talking about, these experiments he's doing. So he goes and
turns on his little saw, starts cutting her cranium. Then the next thing you know, you got the guy, freaking out. So he basically puts him to sleep. But before that, you get the headshot of this guy just looking around. And
I'm glad he brought that up.
the little spider, and then it just blows up, which pisses him off. But then we get into remember the first shot we see is him looking through his camera that he's documenting his work. Then it changes the POV to the subject SA, which is basically subject 99. And it was the female that we seen getting her cranium basically cut open. So he starts talking to her, and he's excited, overwhelmed because she's like his experiment finally happened. He calls her a beauty. But what I found interesting in this whole segment was as he's talking to her, basically taking care of her, and she's looking around. At one point, she lifts up her hand, you see down to the nub. And then all of a sudden she looks at the television where they're playing the news story about him, that they're looking for him, that people have been missing. They suspect him to be the person. And then when she sees herself, he's like, oh, yeah, that's your past life. You're going to remember. Oh, don't worry. So he goes into this whole spiel about, basically nobody understands what I'm doing. As he goes into that, you got the police squad comes in, and this whole thing goes to hell in a handbasket. But for me, visually, it was the better of all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Joe Smith.
All right. Because you know what? This is my number one also.
Oh.
All right. This is my favorite segment.
I thought you were going to hate this.
Stop for a minute. No. This is why we did not discuss about it. So this is my number one. Because this is one thing. The scientist, what he pointed out in the beginning was he kept the parts of the brain that still had your emotions, your memories, your feelings, essentially your humanity. And he was learning how to implement that into a robot. If it's been done in other movies, I think the only reason I paid attention to this one because it's in subtitles. So yes, by the way, when you go to watch it, if you didn't watch it yet, there's subtitles, but that's what helped you pay a little bit more attention. So this shit was fucking brilliant. I mean, this was brilliant. And I even saved this to let you know, Rick. Surprise, motherfucker. I love the gore on this one. I know you seem to think that I don't like gore. Here's the thing. This did the gore just right.
Yeah.
The scientist was a little hammy, but he was portraying a mad scientist.
The scientist gave me Dr. Frankenstein from Day of the Dead vibes. George Romero's Day of the Dead. Even to his death scene, he died the same exact way he did in that film.
Yeah, I mean, this was like, was just, and when I rewatched it the second time, I sat down again, and just paid attention. When the commander sees SA and says that she's not even human anymore and that she's not suffering, Jono, who was the one that found her, recognized that it was her, and he was the one that, even though he saw what she looked like, but up until this point, we hadn't seen what she looked like yet. He still saw her. Yeah. My favorite part was when she put the gun on. And it was on. I mean, I sat there.
I haven't seen violence like that since Rambo.
Dude, and you know what's funny? Because when it was happening, I go, Rick's going to think I'm going to hate this segment. Because of the, he thinks that
absolutely, 100%.
He didn't think I like Psycho Gorman. He didn't think I like Malignant. But this is what I'm trying to say. This is gore in this type of way. This shit was done right.
The gore in this was so much fun. I wrote, once again in my notes, I wrote another banger segment because this segment was dope.
Yeah. Well, the other things about it too is, I mean, if you think about two things of this, one is it was kind of cool seeing that as she's walking around. Yeah, the battery power, the battery life.
Oh yeah.
Slowly going down.
Yes. He had a health life, which was like a health bar,
which was good. Which reminded me of video games.
Again, very video game like. Yes, absolutely.
And two is they were smart in this because if you don't know this by now, the hottest market right now for horror movies is the Asian market. They're coming out with the best horror movies for the last couple of years, actually.
Yeah.
So it was smart to bring in an Asian type horror film into this. And one scene that we didn't talk about too was when she went looking around, she's seen all the other experiments, and there was the one woman on the table.
Oh yeah.
And then she just unplugged her.
Her humanity.
Yeah, I think
Had he not kept that part of her brain,
You're right.
he would have walked away from it. But because he kept it, that's why this part was just like, again, it was just so brilliant because and he did it. The guy achieved combining human and robot into one because he had a robot essentially still have like their humanity in there. Oh man.
And they had the one character who was the cameraman for the SWAT team that
Jono.
stood in there. Jono.
It was Jonah.
He was, he saw through that. You know,
his death,
cool.
man.
Oh man,
poor Jono.
Bro.
Poor Jono. But again, like Junior said, even like in that scene when he turned around to look at her right before that's straight up Asian horror. I mean, like beautiful segment. Loved it.
Good segment, awesome segment. Probably one of the best VHS has ever.
Shocked you, didn't it? That I liked it, huh?
It did. All right. Well, the fourth segment we're going to discuss right now is called Terror. This one's by Ryan Prowse, who's, again, he has just short films in his repertoire. He's basically unknown. I didn't like this one. Now, this was definitely, I don't know what it was about it. I dug like the almost 70s style, like camcorder whole movie feel to it, which made it different, but I just couldn't get into the characters. I didn't like anybody in this. Joe, why don't you walk us through Terror?
Well, first of all, the reason you couldn't get into any of these characters because they were a bunch of racist people. I mean,
I love Django Unchained. That's nothing but racism.
But not this. Yes, that's a different type of movie, though.
Yeah, you're right.
The characters on here, there wasn't anybody we're gonna find likable. Essentially, they were a militia group. They were getting ready to plan on destroying this federal building. When it starts off, you see them driving through, trying to figure out where they can have an entrance to this building. And then in the meantime, you also see them going back and watching them keep shooting this guy over and over. And then you later on find out that they're basically like draining him of the blood. Lo and behold, it's a vampire. And they've figured out that with the use of the blood, if the blood injecting it or putting it into something, once it hits the sun, the way a vampire would do, would explode. And another one, because not to take it out of all the scenes to talk, but yeah, so like we get to the point, they inject this bunny, poor little fucking bunny, put him in a cage, and when the sun hits it, it goes off like a bomb. And then Junior, you can finish off of the crazy ending. By the way, though, even though you guys didn't like it, this is my number 2.
Fun fact though, when that scene came with the bunny, I won't lie, I skipped it. I just said to skip, boom, boom, boom until it passed. Man, animals.
I know you don't like the animals.
I hate that.
Know,
I think it's weak writing most of the time. It's just to get an emotion out of somebody. But it makes sense within this context though. I'm not taking points off because of that. It's just a personal preference. I don't like seeing it. So, but JR, go for it.
See, I got this as the last of my before. It just felt this movie was out of date as far as when, because we're led to believe it's 94, but if you look at the times now, this movie kind of fits the times now. So it was kind of, you're watching what's going on now in our current society as far as the politics go with destroying the government, stuff like that.
If this film was before Test Subject or The Subject, I probably would have liked it more. But coming off of that, yeah, and I know why it came last. That's going to factor into the end of the film. But yeah, go for it.
But it was. I mean, I couldn't. Like, I had to watch it, like rewind a couple times because it just. I had a hard time just wanting to invest a little bit more into this segment. But I mean, the what I give it kudos for is the vampire dude. Like, actually, kind of look cool when he turned into a vampire. It reminded me of a cross of the vampires from Blade 2 and the Predator with the opening of his freaking mouth thing. So that was kind of cool. I mean, reminded me of the Predator thing. I mean, it was creative. It was very creative. I mean, let's use vampire blood, as part of weapons for an army, because they kept calling it the weapon. I mean, but for me, I mean, it was okay. I mean, I thought the coolest scene for me was when the guy got on a turret gun and just started shooting everybody. I mean, I
freaked out.
I got that on my notes. I put the fat dude on the
the dude just
was that a 50 cal? What the hell was that?
Yeah, it was that was pretty cool.
Yeah, he started shooting all his boys there, like
he started shooting to nowhere.
But it's a cool concept. Seeing from their point of view, how they're setting up these bombings and what's their inner workings, for example. And they brought the horror element into it, where they kept shooting the guy over and over before we knew where he was. But it's just like, yeah, I just this one I just couldn't get into it. The ending it's kind of made up for it. The ending was good. I like the vampire.
Yeah, he killed them all.
Yeah, he was done well. I dug that. But you know what is coming off of the subject? Oh man, I just
It is. Subject should have been the last one.
Yeah.
In order, they didn't put it in the right order. Is all.
So, all right. With that being said, now the wraparound, we're gonna finish it up right now. Holly Hell. Now, this is where everything comes full circle in a sense here. Yeah, personally, I wasn't, like Joe mentioned, I wasn't feeling this at all. This kind of really just took the wind out of my sails by the end of the film. I was on a high within the first few. Then between Terror and this, I was like, oh man. But yeah, GR, let's go briefly right now. Closing thoughts. Give us your thoughts on the wraparound, and if you want to just rate it at the end, go for it, man.
Honestly, I feel like we didn't even need anything after watching the Terror, because I mean, you end up finding out that this whole squad they're corrupt from the inside. You have a group that basically are part of the VHS thing. They made the guy watch like a freaking stag screen, and no, it was killing. I mean, for me, it was a whole waste of time. We didn't need it. And if it wasn't for the subject, I would have rated this a lot lower. But because the subject was there, I give it like a 3 out of 5, to be honest. I just think it could have been a better installment. The whole wraparound could have been a lot better, and it would have been a better rating for this film.
Sure.
All right. Same for me. The ending did not pay off for me. And they were the final girls, and they were part of a cult of snuff films. They do snuff films where they basically kill men. So yeah, that like it was weak. It is because of the subject that this is a 3.5.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with 3.5 too, because I was high on this film. I did like the storm drain. I dug the wake a lot. I just love the creep show feel to it. The subject was awesome, but then the Terror and the overall wraparound, yeah, it brought it down to me. Now, we didn't bring this up though. The guy in the very last shot that the girls were tormenting was the guy from the Terror episode, the cop who gave him all the guns.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
so that's why I think they put Terror at the end to kind of lead into that. So
gotcha.
But other than that, last thing in my notes when I got to the Holly Hill, I did put final girls, and I put Joe's gonna like that.
Yeah, that's what I thought about.
I hated that they used that.
I know.
We're the final girls. No, you're not.
That was so bad.
The final girls survive it. They're not the killers in it. I mean, no.
But this film, I would say if you're a fan, check it out. All right, so this film is going to be exclusively on Shudder, and if you got Amazon Prime, you could do Shudder through there as well. How I saw it, and check it out if you're a horror fan, and let us know what you think in the comment section below. Yes. And with that being said, this is going to be it. This is the end. I am Ricky Grimes, Horror Fiend TV. We got my man Joe and JR. Thank you guys once again for coming through.
And if there's a movie out there that you want us to review, we are willing to review it. We want to review it. Just leave comments below. Hey, we want to hear from you as well. So let us know. We're here to review whatever you want us to review.
Absolutely. And with that being said, I am Ricky Grimes. We got Joe. We got JR. This is Horror Fiend TV. 3 corners of horror. Until next time, stay scared. Peace.